The Mason family home stood proudly on Maple Avenue, its Victorian architecture a testament to better days. I parked my car in the familiar driveway, noting how the once pristine garden had begun to show signs of neglect. Dead leaves scattered across the lawn, and the white paint was peeling from the wraparound porch where I'd spent countless summer evenings as a child. I'm Alexander Mason, Alex to most, and at 35, I'd built a comfortable life for myself as an investment banker in Boston. Unlike my younger sister Sarah, who still lived at home at 32, I'd moved out right after college, determined to make my own way. Our parents, Robert and Eleanor Mason, had always been peculiar about money, generous with Sarah, but oddly resistant to my success. The urgent call had come 3 days ago. Mom's voice trembled on the phone. "Alex, we need to talk. It's about the house." I knew things had been tight since Dad's early retirement, but nothing prepared me for what I was about to walk into. Inside, the house felt different. Family photos still lined the walls, but I noticed something odd. The newer ones mostly showed Sarah, Mom, and Dad. Pictures of me had gradually disappeared over the years, except for one old graduation photo tucked in a corner. "Alex, thank goodness you're here." Mom hurried from the kitchen, still wearing the apron I'd given her at her last birthday. Dad sat in his favorite armchair, looking older than his 65 years. Sarah perched on the sofa's arm, scrolling through her phone with apparent disinterest. "What's going on?" I asked, taking a seat across from them. The atmosphere felt heavy, like the air before a storm. Dad cleared his throat. "Son, we're in trouble. The bank. They're threatening foreclosure." I sat straighter. "Foreclosure? How much are we talking about?" $450,000, Mom whispered, wringing her hands. "We took out a second mortgage 3 years ago, and with the interest." "3 years?" I interrupted. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Sarah finally looked up from her phone. "We didn't want to burden you," she said, but her tone suggested otherwise. "You're always so busy with your fancy job." I ignored the jab. "Let me see the paperwork." Dad handed over a stack of documents, and as I read through them, my banker's training kicked in. The terms were predatory, the interest rate astronomical, but something else caught my eye. Several large withdrawals marked as home improvements. "What improvements?" I asked, looking around. The house looked exactly the same as it had for years. Mom and Sarah exchanged glances. "Oh, you know," Sarah said vaguely. "Stuff." I pulled out my laptop and started running numbers. "I can help," I said finally. "I have savings, and with my bonus coming up." "Oh, Alex." Mom rushed to hug me. "We knew we could count on you." The next week was a blur of paperwork and bank meetings. I liquidated my investment portfolio, dipped into my house fund, and even sold some stock options. $450,000, nearly everything I'd saved over the last decade, transferred to clear my parents' debt. "Just sign here," the bank manager said, sliding over the final document, "and the house will be secure." What I didn't notice then was how Mom kept glancing at her phone, or how Sarah seemed to be hiding a smile. 2 weeks later, I stopped by to check on things. The front door was open, and I heard voices from Dad's study. "Perfect," Sarah was saying. "Now that it's all settled." I knocked and entered. Mom, Dad, and Sarah sat around the desk, papers spread before them. They jumped slightly at my appearance. "Alex." Mom's voice was too bright. "We didn't expect you today." "Just checking in," I said, trying to glimpse the papers they were hurriedly gathering. Everything okay? Never better, Sarah chirped. In fact, we're celebrating tonight. But unfortunately, it's family only. I stared at her. I am family. Of course you are, dear, Mom said quickly. Sarah means immediate household members. You understand. I didn't understand, but I left. Something felt wrong, though I couldn't put my finger on it. The next morning, a certified letter arrived at my apartment. Official letterhead, legal language, and there at the top, Notice of Tenancy Agreement. My hands shook as I read further. According to the document, I was now officially listed as a tenant in my family's home, with no ownership rights or claims to the property. The house I just saved, the home I grew up in, legally belonged solely to my parents and Sarah. I called immediately. What is this? Oh, that, Sarah answered, sounding bored. Just some legal protection, brother. You understand business, don't you? We need to make sure everything's properly documented. Properly documented? I just gave you $450,000. Gave. She laughed. You helped your parents pay their debt. That's what good children do. But we can't have you claiming any ownership just because you helped out. You're just a tenant now. If we let you visit at all. The phone slipped from my numb fingers. I sat in my apartment, surrounded by investment statements showing my now empty accounts, and felt something break inside me. But then I remembered something they didn't know about. I drove to my storage unit across town. In the back, behind boxes of college textbooks and old sports trophies, sat a small fireproof safe. My grandfather had given it to me on his deathbed 10 years ago. Keep this safe, Alex, he'd whispered. Open it only when they show their true colors. I'd never understood what he meant, until now. The safe's combination, my birthday, clicked into place. Inside lay a single envelope, yellowed with age, but sealed with my grandfather's distinctive wax stamp. My hands trembled as I opened it. My dearest Alexander, if you're reading this, then what I feared has come to pass. Your parents and sister have finally revealed their true nature. I watched them over the years, saw how they treated you differently, how they took advantage of your kind heart. What they don't know, what I never told them, is that I changed my will shortly before my death. The house on Maple Avenue, which I left to your parents with such apparent generosity, came with conditions. Hidden conditions, filed with my private attorney and set to activate only under specific circumstances. If they ever attempt to exploit you financially, if they ever try to deny you your rightful place in the family, these conditions come into effect immediately. The house never truly belonged to them, Alex. It belonged to you from the moment I died. They were merely trustees, and they have violated that trust. Contact Thomas Wellington at Wellington and Associates. He has all the necessary documentation. Remember, my boy, sometimes the kindest hearts need the strongest protection. Love, Grandpa James. I sat back, the letter trembling in my hands. Below was a business card, faded but legible, for Wellington and Associates. My phone buzzed. Another text from Sarah. BT Tavu, you'll need to schedule visits in advance now. Can't have tenants drop in by whenever they want. I smiled for the first time in weeks and typed a reply. Actually, we need to talk. All of us. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. And bring all those papers you were hiding. Or what? Came the quick response. Or I'll show you what Grandpa James really left behind. The typing indicator appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, What are you talking about? Tomorrow at 2, I replied. Don't be late. After all, it's my house. I turned off my phone, tucked the letter carefully into my briefcase, and began planning how to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The game they'd been playing was about to change, and I finally held the winning hand. At precisely 2 p.m. the next day, I sat in my grandfather's old leather chair in the study, the letter and a thick folder from Wellington and Associates spread before me. The attorney had worked through the night, pulling archived documents and preparing the necessary paperwork. Everything was exactly as Grandpa James had planned. The doorbell rang. I heard Sarah's voice first, high and irritated. Why are his cars blocking the driveway? He can't park there anymore. Actually, I can park anywhere I want, I called out. Please come into the study. They filed in, Mom looking nervous, Dad avoiding my eyes, and Sarah with her usual smirk, though it faltered slightly when she saw me behind the desk. What's this about, Alex? Mom tried to sound authoritative. We're very busy today. Sit down, I said quietly. All of you. Something in my tone made them comply. Sarah opened her mouth, probably for another snide comment, but Dad touched her arm, silencing her. First, let's review recent events. I began, opening a folder. 2 weeks ago, I paid $450,000 to save this house. Money I'd saved for 10 years. Money that represented my dreams and my future plans. And how did you repay that sacrifice? By legally declaring me a tenant with no rights to the property. It was just a precaution, Mom started. A precaution? I pulled out their legal document. This isn't a precaution. This is a calculated move to ensure I couldn't claim any part of the house I just saved. But here's what's interesting. I leaned forward. You can't declare someone a tenant of a property you don't actually own. The room went silent. Sarah's smirk disappeared entirely. What are you talking about? Dad's voice shook slightly. Of course we own this house. Your grandfather left it to us in his will. Did you ever actually read the will? The full version, not just the summary you were given. More silence. I pulled out Grandpa James's letter and began reading aloud. With each word, their faces grew paler. When I finished, Sarah jumped up. That's ridiculous. Grandpa would never. Mr. Wellington, I called out, and the attorney stepped in from where he'd been waiting in the hallway. Please explain the legal situation to my family. The distinguished lawyer adjusted his glasses. The property at 47 Maple Avenue was indeed left to Robert and Eleanor Mason as trustees only. The true ownership was placed in a conditional trust, with Alexander Mason as the sole beneficiary. This arrangement would remain dormant unless certain conditions were met, specifically any attempt to financially exploit or exclude Alexander from his rightful family position. That's impossible, Mom whispered. Not impossible, Mr. Wellington continued. Just very carefully planned. James Mason was an intelligent man who saw things clearly. The recent attempts to classify Alexander as a tenant have activated all dormant clauses of the trust. As of this morning, full ownership of the property has legally transferred to Alexander Mason. Sarah collapsed back into her chair. Dad's face had gone gray. This house, I said quietly, has always been mine. Grandpa knew something like this might happen. He saw how you treated me differently, how you favored Sarah, how you tried to minimize my achievements while celebrating her smallest efforts. We never, Mom began. Really? I pulled out my phone and played a recording from last week, Sarah's voice clearly saying, Now that it's all settled, we can finally stop pretending we need him around. You recorded us, Sarah shrieked. No, you recorded yourselves. You accidentally butt-dialed me during your little celebration. Funny how people reveal their true selves when they think no one's listening. Mr. Wellington cleared his throat. There are two options here. Option 1. Alexander takes immediate possession of the property, and you have 30 days to vacate. You can't throw us out. Sarah jumped up again. Where would we go? Option 2. I continued as if she hadn't spoken. We reach a new understanding. One based on truth and respect, not manipulation and exploitation. What kind of understanding? Dad asked quietly. It was the first time he'd spoken. I pulled out another document, a family trust, a real one, with all of us as equal beneficiaries. The house stays in the family, but with proper legal protections for everyone, including me. And my $450,000, I added. It will be repaid from Sarah's trust fund, the one you've been building with all those mysterious home improvements that never actually happened. Sarah went pale. They've been funneling money into her private account, disguising it as house repairs. How did you? I'm a banker, Sarah. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? Mom started crying softly. Dad just stared at his hands. Sarah looked like she'd swallowed something sour. You have until tomorrow to decide, I said, standing up. Mr. Wellington will leave his card. Choose wisely. As I walked toward the door, Mom's voice stopped me. Alex, wait. Were we really so terrible to you? I turned back. You weren't terrible. You were subtle. Every time you praised Sarah's minimal efforts while dismissing my achievements. Every time you asked for help, but made me feel guilty for giving it. Every time you treated me like an outsider in my own family. Small cuts, but they add up. I never realized. Dad began. That's the problem, I said softly. You never realized because you never tried to see it. But Grandpa did, and he made sure I'd be protected when I finally saw it too. I left them sitting there, surrounded by the evidence of their manipulation and the consequences of their choices. As I drove away, I felt lighter somehow. The truth, even painful truth, has a way of clearing the air. Mr. Wellington called the next morning. They'd chosen option 2. The new family trust would be established, with equal protections for all. Sarah's trust fund would be used to repay my savings. And most importantly, we'd all attend family counseling to address the years of unequal treatment. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was a start. Sometimes the biggest houses need the strongest foundations, and sometimes those foundations need to be completely rebuilt. The next 6 months brought changes none of us could have predicted. The family counseling sessions, which started as tense, silent standoffs, gradually evolved into real conversations, hard ones, but necessary. One particularly memorable session in April changed everything. Our therapist, Dr. Martinez, asked each of us to share a childhood memory that shaped our relationship with money and family. Sarah went first, surprising everyone with her honesty. I was 12 when I overheard Mom and Dad talking about Alex's scholarship to Princeton. They said, "Thank goodness he got a full ride, because we need to save everything for Sarah. She'll need more help." She looked at me, tears in her eyes. That's when I started believing I was somehow less capable than you. So I stopped trying as hard, because everyone expected me to fail anyway. Mom covered her face with her hands. We thought we were protecting you, Sarah. We saw how naturally things came to Alex, and we overcompensated. By crippling her confidence, Dr. Martinez noted, and simultaneously resenting Alex for his independence. I spoke next. Every achievement of mine was downplayed because it might make Sarah feel bad. Every time I succeeded, I felt guilty. When I made vice president at the bank last year, Mom's first response was, "Don't tell Sarah. She's still struggling to find her path." Dad shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "We created this mess, didn't we? Trying to protect one child, we hurt both of you." The real breakthrough came during a private session between Sarah and me. Without our parents present, we finally had the conversation we needed for 20 years. "I never hated you, Alex," Sarah admitted. "I hated living in your shadow. But instead of pushing myself to create my own light, I just tried to dim yours." "And I never wanted to outshine you," I replied. "I just wanted to be celebrated for my successes without feeling like I was hurting you." That conversation led to another surprising development. Sarah, inspired by our discussions about financial independence, enrolled in a business management course. She started showing up at my office during lunch breaks, asking questions about investment strategies and corporate structures. "I want to understand what you do," she said one day. "Not to compete, but to learn. I've spent so long being the family failure that I forgot I could be something else." The house, meanwhile, underwent its own transformation. Instead of being a symbol of division, it became a project we tackled together. Sarah discovered she had a talent for interior design, and I found myself enjoying the physical work of renovation. Mom and Dad struggled the most with the changes, but they were trying. The weekly family dinners, once filled with subtle jabs and underlying tension, became genuine attempts at reconnection. One Sunday evening, as we sat on the newly restored porch, Dad handed me a small box. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it," he said quietly. Inside was a key and a photograph, one I'd never seen before. It showed Grandpa James holding me as a baby, while a young version of my father looked on. "Your grandfather told me something the day this picture was taken," Dad said, his voice thick with emotion. He said, "A family's wealth isn't in its bank accounts or property deeds. It's in how they lift each other up." I forgot that lesson somewhere along the way. I'm trying to remember it now. The key, he explained, was to Grandpa's old lake cabin, a property we'd all thought had been sold years ago. Dad had actually maintained it secretly, unable to part with his father's favorite retreat. "I've kept it in good condition," he said. Maybe we could all go there sometime. As a family. A real one this time." Sarah, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "We could make it a monthly thing. Take turns organizing activities. No competition, no comparisons. Just family." Mom reached for Dad's hand, then mine, then Sarah's, forming a circle in the fading sunlight. "Your grandfather would be proud," she said, "not of what we were, but of what we're becoming." Looking at them, my sister's newfound confidence, my parents' genuine attempts at change, the subtle shift from resentment to understanding, I realized Grandpa James's letter had given us something far more valuable than property rights. It had given us the chance to rebuild not just a house, but a family. That evening, as everyone helped clean up after dinner, I slipped into the study and looked at Grandpa's portrait above the fireplace. "Thank you," I whispered, "for seeing what needed to be protected and what needed to be healed." The portrait seemed to smile back, as if to say some foundations take time to set properly, but once they do, they can support anything. 1 year to the day after I found Grandpa James's letter, we gathered at the lake cabin for a special occasion. The autumn leaves painted the mountains in brilliant reds and golds, reflecting off the water like a watercolor come to life. Sarah stood at the small podium we'd set up on the deck, her business school graduation certificate in hand. She had completed her program with honors, and the small investment firm she'd started with my mentorship was already showing promise. "I never thought I'd be here," she said, addressing our small family gathering. "For years, I defined myself by what I wasn't as successful as Alex, wasn't as driven, wasn't as worthy. But this past year taught me something important. Success isn't a limited resource. One person's achievements don't diminish another's potential." Mom and Dad sat holding hands, both looking prouder than I had ever seen them. The counseling sessions had helped them understand how their well-intentioned but misguided attempts to protect Sarah had affected both of their children. After the small ceremony, as we gathered around the fire pit, Dad cleared his throat. "Your mother and I have an announcement," he said, pulling out an envelope. "We've been working with Mr. Wellington on something special." Inside the envelope was a deed to the lake cabin. But what caught my eye was the ownership structure. It was listed under the Mason Family Heritage Trust, with all 4 of our names as equal beneficiaries. "We wanted to create something new," Mom explained. "Something that belongs to all of us equally. No manipulation, no hidden agendas, just family." Sarah reached for my hand, squeezing it tight. A year ago, such a gesture would have been unthinkable. Now it felt natural. "There's more," Dad continued. "We've established a family investment fund. Each of us will contribute what we can, when we can. Sarah's business expertise and Alex's financial knowledge will guide it. Equal input, equal benefits. And equal responsibility," Mom added. "We're learning that true family support means believing in each other's strength, not just protecting against weakness." As the sun set over the lake, we roasted marshmallows and shared stories. Real ones this time, without the undercurrent of competition that had tainted so many gatherings before. Sarah told us about her plans to expand her firm, focusing on helping small family businesses maintain healthy financial relationships. I shared news about a mentorship program I was starting at the bank, inspired by our family's journey. Looking around at their faces glowing in the firelight, I realized Grandpa James had given us far more than a lesson in property rights. He had given us the push we needed to break down the walls we built between us and rebuild something stronger. The house on Maple Avenue still stands proudly, now truly a family home. The rooms that once held secrets and resentment are filled with honest conversations and shared dreams. Sarah has her own wing where she runs her business. Mom's garden is blooming again, and Dad has settled into the role of family historian, documenting our journey for future generations. As for me, I finally understood what Grandpa meant in his letter about the kindest hearts needing the strongest protection. Sometimes that protection isn't just about legal documents and property rights. It's about creating boundaries that allow love to flow freely, without fear of exploitation or manipulation. That evening, as we walked back to the cabin, I spotted a shooting star streaking across the darkening sky. "Make a wish," Sarah said, just like when we were kids. But looking at my family, really looking at them, I realized I didn't need to. Everything I could have wished for was already here. Truth instead of manipulation, support instead of competition, and love without conditions. Somewhere, I knew, Grandpa James was smiling. His letter hadn't just protected his grandson's inheritance, it had restored his family's soul.